Welcome. This is our third TSEL implementation support flipped classroom release. I'm Shelby Diaz, School Improvement Specialist for the Student Behavioral Health and Wellness team here at the SOESD. Welcome, welcome. For today's video, we are veering ever slightly off course from working directly on our own district or school level TSEL implementation plan. We're going to examine and learn about the social emotional learning implementation stories of others from across our nation. I recently had the opportunity to attend Castle's Social Emotional Learning Exchange in Chicago, and I was inspired to bring back some of the implementation information about the social emotional strategic planning process from various lenses. So today we'll be looking at some information from school districts like Chicago Public Schools, the Metro Nashville Public Schools, Sheldon Berman, who is the lead superintendent for social emotional learning at the School Superintendents Association, and the Ruler Organization, and how they've used their role to assist social emotional learning implementation at various schools. So we'll take some time here to get a glimpse of what the work can look like for those who have already been engaged in it for a while. We're going to begin by looking at Castle's 3 signature practices, which are intentional tools that can be built in throughout the day for, and I'm quoting here from Metro Nashville Public Schools Social Emotional Playbook. These can be used to establish a safe container for equity of voice, for truly seeing one another and celebrating one another as our fullest selves, to create a safe and caring community of learners where they are valued and able to learn and work together productively. So these signature practices can and really should become a part of every educational environment. So that's from our daily lesson planning as teachers to adult meeting agendas, for creating that culture of safety and belonging and learning, which is really at the heart of social emotional learning. The 3 signature practices are an inclusive opening, which brings the voice of every participant in, making connections to one another and to the work ahead. The second is the engaging work period, and these include strategies which are inherently infused with social emotional learning in varying complexity and are facilitated to support learning individually and collectively. And the third practice is our reflective closing, and that's an intentional moment to transition meaningfully from an engagement by reflecting, connecting, and appreciating learning. So we will engage in an inclusive welcome. This is borrowed from Atlanta Public Schools, and it's from the self-awareness competency, which is the ability to accurately recognize our own emotions, thoughts, and values and how they influence our behavior. It's the ability to accurately assess our strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. Our question for you to reflect on is, what advice would the you from last year give to the you from this year, and why? So pause this video for maybe 1 to 3 minutes, whatever is best for you, to get this answer from yourself. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that mini conversation with yourself. When I reflected on this, my previous self reminded me that change is hard. Living in the new can be very uncomfortable. And then this is the part that brought me right to where I needed to be, which was that hard spot, that uncomfortable spot, that's where the learning is. So you can see how just a little reflection like that really brought me into my own growth mindset. All right, so the second of Castle's 3 signature practices is the engaging work period. And these are brain compatible strategies to foster relationships. They are culturally responsive and provide empowerment and collaboration by anchoring the learning, regaining focus, and enhancing creativity. And so in short, they build relationships with one another and academic content. For us, we will bring this into our practice at our next office hours on December 17th. We'll do this practice again. And I'm sharing with you a nice table here. This is borrowed again from the Metro Nashville Public Schools with goals and examples of how to do this for adult-centered SEL, meetings, things like that. Also student-centered social emotional learning and class content areas. This can be done in math or PE from kindergarten to high school because they are really built into the lesson plan and into the school day. So go ahead and take a look at that, and we will continue to practice some of these throughout. All right. So take a look. This is the strategic planning process. And as I mentioned, we're really going to be looking at how districts have developed their long-term plans, sketched a multi-year plan, and developed short-term goals, actions, and evaluations. So for today, I'm going to be sharing some examples of like step 4, 5, and 6. And then at the end of our time together today, I will share some resources for you for step 3 and step 7. Okay, so we're going to begin by looking at how a couple of districts have interpreted developing long-term priorities because remember, there's no one-size-fits-all for social emotional learning implementation. It's really about the process. So as you're probably discovering, it's like the balance of knowing you and your students, your families, your teachers, and your community, where you already are, what you're already doing to meet the social emotional needs for those stakeholders, and then building a plan in a way that works for you. So let's see what this district, this is Schaumburg District 54 outside of Chicago, what they came up with. So we can see how they've interpreted the competencies to meet their needs. And then they very clearly define what those meanings are. And I'm sorry, the slide is a little bit fuzzy, but I really put this one up here because of how they are building their vocabulary and defining what these competency descriptions are so that they can communicate what that means exactly to their district, to their school, and to their community, for example, of what self-regulation is. So they're defining it as setting goals, discipline and planning and organization, motivating oneself to accomplish outcomes, managing time, and controlling emotions and impulses. So this makes it very easy for them to communicate what their SEL competencies are to the folks that they're working with. The same thing here. This is from some of Sheldon Berman's work, and they've determined what their core social emotional practices are and then defined what each one of those means and what it will look like. So Sheldon Berman, as I mentioned before, is a superintendent, and he's worked with several districts across the nation, including Corvallis School District right here in Oregon. So you can see how these priority areas are super clear, like what teaching empathy and social skills really means and what it looks like. And we can take a look at a tool from Chicago Public Schools. This is how they built out their social emotional learning program. They decided on being a healing centered as their vision. So they are to achieve our healing centered vision. Chicago Public Schools is committed to employ a holistic strategy. Therefore, we are focused on driving change through 5 components. And then they determine and drill down on what those long-term priorities are. And they're very clearly defining each of those. So you can kind of see, it gives you an idea of how different districts are doing this work differently. All right, so an intentional pause. We're just going to take this moment to reflect briefly, however works best for you. Maybe what's coming up for you, any ideas that this is provoking, or maybe some questions. We'll just take one moment. All right, great. So what was coming up for me, and maybe same thing for you, was how did they do it? How did they do it, right? They did it by sketching out that multi-year plan. So let's take a look at this multi-year plan. This is from the Ruler organization, nonprofit organization, which you may be familiar with. This plan, it's not developed by year, but it's developed by phases. So you can see how well this one aligns to the CASEL implementation. So they're starting with the adult personal SEL and the professional learning. And then they're including the adult social emotional learning and their district leaders in that plan. They're creating their team, educating the staff. Then they move into classroom integration for their student social emotional learning, finally, right? And family communication. And then they've built in their cycle of improvement. Again, we're back with Chicago Public Schools. This is more of a backwards projected timeline, so they built it after they've completed it, but you can see that they've started this work back in 2019, 2020. That was their planning and building cycle. So they did their framework building, their vision building. They brought their stakeholders in for some of those stakeholder sessions. They did a best practice review, etc. 1 year, they did for preparing their implementation phase in 2020 and 2021. And then they launched in 2021, 2022, and they did this through a pilot program for their strategies. And they were using coaches. This is where they implemented their social emotional learning curriculum. They did a skills inventory, and they aligned it with their mental health and suicide prevention programs. So now 2022, 2023 and beyond, you can see they're calibrating and expanding their implementation. So they continue to use that cycle of improvement, and it's a work in progress. All right, so now we'll look at how some districts are developing goals and actions and evaluations and assessments. So here's some more work from the Metro Nashville Public Schools, and we can see here that their goals are, they put them into some guiding questions for social emotional learning and academic integration. I like how they've done this. So they're always asking, how do we get all learners to do the thinking and heavy lifting first? How do we get the voices of all learners to exceed teacher talk? And how do we get all learners to regularly reflect on social emotional learning and academic skills? So they are embedding in all aspects these goals into the classroom and the school. And then this is one of their assessment tools. So they developed this from the CASEL walkthrough rubric, and they're using it as a tool to measure their school-wide social emotional learning and aligning it with their goals that you saw from the previous slide. So CASEL has this resource, which you can adapt to meet the needs of your social emotional implementation, and I'll share that with you and link it below and send it to you in an email. Again, here's some of the work from Chicago Public Schools. So you can see that for each of their healing-centered support teams, if you just look at that first box there, each team has actionable, measurable goals with an assessment tool built in. So they have, for their tiered SEL teaming structure, 100% of schools continuously enhancing school-wide climate and culture, 100% of all students feeling safe and supported by their school community, as measured by professional development learning cycles and team self-reports. And then they put those school-wide climate assessment and planning, their culture teams, and their supportive school indicators there down below. And then they go on to have this built in for all of their support teams. This is a very robust plan, but it started by them assessing how they could use the MTSS framework for these systems. So they intentionally decided to start with their MTSS framework to eliminate barriers and produce positive outcomes through their teaming structure. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you are feeling inspired. I was really excited to share all of this with you guys, really because my main takeaway was it's okay to slow down. I saw that these people had been working on it for 5 years or more, but still, the main takeaways and the main lessons that they shared are to really start where you're at. So look at all the great things that you're already doing. And then it's from there that you can begin the work of building up a more robust multi-year plan with action steps and assessments. So I'm going to share some new resources with you to help you move some of that work forward. They will be linked below and available in your inbox with this video. If for some reason you can't access them, just make sure to reach out through our Student Behavioral Health and Wellness website. So remember how the Metro Nashville Public Schools was using their walkthrough rubric to assess school-wide SEL? Well, this is a resource that was just put out by CASEL. It's in the form of a walkthrough rubric, but it's a really great pre-assessment tool to use. So this is something you could use before you get started as part of your needs and resources assessment. And it's a great tool to introduce to teachers to really assess what your current implementation is. I like it because it's really crafting a lens for all of us to see the work that we're already doing and how it is already aligned with social emotional learning. So, for example, for explicit SEL instruction, what could it look like? Evidence of an SEL program, for example, posters, circles, related student work, or structured SEL lessons at least weekly. So it starts to give your teachers an idea of like, hey, yes, we are already doing some of this work. And then you can build that into your needs and resource assessment. Here is the CASEL tool with the indicators of school-wide SEL. This is their walkthrough protocol. This is what the Metro Nashville Public Schools started with and adapted for their district. And again, another iteration of that same tool. I really like this one. It's a great starting tool, and it could be used regularly as part of your cycle of continuous improvement. So in the table, you can collate information on your programs, your practices, and your strategy that your school is already using. And then you can reflect on how your school community can grow the most, where to put the focus for your SEL implementation efforts. These could be some possible goal ideas. And this one's cool because it assesses the foundational structures that are in place and those 10 indicators of school-wide social emotional learning. All right. So you're seeing that 10 indicators tool come up a lot. I would recommend and I would love if before our next office hours meeting on Tuesday, December 17th, that you took an opportunity to look through those 3 school-wide indicator tools shared below, get familiar with them, maybe even bring them to your SEL team to see what they think. And then at our office hours, we can discuss how you might be able to use them as part of your implementation tool belt, either as a needs assessment or to use for your continuous improvement cycle. On the other hand, if you already have used one of these tools or you're using something else for the needs and resource assessment tool, please bring that too. We'd love to see what you're using and how you're using it. So our office hours are December 17th from 9 to 10 a.m. on Zoom. On that date, I will also share a social emotional learning aligned content area lesson plan so we can start to take a look at what that might look like for our teachers. I'll share the new TSEL at a glance sheet, which is a nice one-pager that you can do a resource share with at your site, and the new social emotional learning standards and mathematics standards crosswalk that was put out by ODE. So this is a cool one for our math teachers it maps the TSEL standards with the 8 standards for mathematical practices, and also gives an overlay of the alignment between the two. So that's really exciting stuff. And last but not least, our reflective closing for our 3 signature practices. So please take a moment to ask yourself, how can we embed continuous self-evaluation into our practices to increase our self-awareness? If you'd like to take a note on this and share at our office hours, that would be great. We'd love to hear. So we'll see you there, and thank you so much for watching.